the amazing Sarah Khan and what she shares with us today. A wonderful talk, and she'll tell you what it's about, but the title is Feel with the Heart of Another. Sarah Khan.
Thank you so much, James. Thank you once again, Tay. I'm getting messages on chat here how much they thoroughly enjoyed the meditation exercise. So thank you. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, whatever the time is in your side of the world. So, I actually had no idea what I was going to talk about today. And, it's not because I have a shortage of topics or concepts or ideas. In fact, reading, reflecting, and running are my three passions. So the reason why I didn't know what to talk about was actually something else. There's a story about a woman in India who was very upset with her son for eating way too much sugar. And no matter how much she chided him, he continued to satisfy his sweet tooth. Now, totally frustrated, one day she decided to take her son to his greatest idol, who was Mahatma Gandhi. Now, she approached the great leader respectfully and she said, "Sir, my son eats too much sugar. It's not good for his health. Could you please advise him to stop?" Now, Gandhi listened to the woman carefully, and then he turned to the little boy and he said, "Go home and then come back after 2 weeks." Now the woman looked perplexed and she wondered why he didn't ask him to stop eating sugar. But she took the son and she went home. 2 weeks later, she came back with the boy. Now Gandhi motioned for them to come forward, and then he looked at the boy directly into his eyes and he said, "Boy, you should stop eating sugar. It's not good for your health." Now the boy nodded his head and he promised that he would stop. Now the boy's mother turned to Gandhi and asked, "But sir, why didn't you tell him that 2 weeks ago?" Now Gandhi smiled and he replied, "Mother, 2 weeks ago, I was still eating sugar." So you see, guys, no one is required to change more than those among us who are perceived as role models or transformational leaders or motivational speakers, because we are expected to model the behaviors we want others to adapt, right? And that is why, even though I didn't have a shortage of thought-provoking knowledge to share with you all today, it's not easy to put all of that knowledge into practice, especially when it pertains to spiritual wisdom, because that requires you to achieve ultimate freedom through self-sufficiency. And, since I'm still working on myself in that area, I can't give advice unless I live by it. And so I decided to talk about something else today. But it's a topic that's not only relevant in today's times, but it is also something I have convictions about through lived experience. So here goes. We all have within us the ability to cure many of the world's ills, if only we would pause to communicate. Now, as a social species, we are all neurobiologically hardwired for connection, isn't it? And that is why in the absence of connection, we always suffer. And yet today, it feels like we are living in an ideological combat zone. Our differences are intensifying and polarization is tearing the seams of society. And this isn't just an American illness. This is a global pandemic. Now, British Pakistani novelist Mohsin Hamid, he says, "Change begins with understanding. And understanding begins when you find echoes of another in yourself." So in order to connect with another and to create social harmony, we must learn to feel with the heart of another. So we must learn to cultivate empathy. Now, the three tools to cultivate empathy are: number one, move in. What do I mean by that? You know, one of my favorite social scientists once said, people are hard to hate close up, so move in. Now, as an advocate for empathy, you know, whenever I give talks on the importance of moving in, I always include stories from my childhood in India. Now, you guys should see the way people stare at me when I tell them that I was born in a Hindu country, raised as a Muslim in a conservative Islamic household, and since the age of 3, I studied under nuns in an all-girls Catholic convent. To them, it seems like, the perfect formula for spontaneous combustion. But in reality, I believe that it equipped me with the ability to empathize with those on the opposite ends of my ideological spectrum and to be able to express tolerance and respect for all religions. Now, my last memories of India were the Bombay riots that followed the Babri Mosque demolition. Now, you know, as a young girl, I was oblivious to how religions can be exploited, manipulated, and leveraged for political gain. You know, when we become too attached to an ideology, we leave no room for nuance. You're either with us or you're against us. We become desensitized and unable to feel with the heart of another. Now, what we don't realize is that both sides' perspective is their only reality, right? Their truth is as self-evident to them as ours is to us. You know what I always remember about the Bombay riots is that our Hindu neighbors risked their lives to protect us against the Hindu mobs that went door to door looking to kill Muslims. Now, because our neighbors had moved in and because they had gotten to know us, they were able to understand our perspective and empathize with our vulnerable situation. And had we not moved in and gotten to know them, we wouldn't have trusted them with our lives, knowing that they belonged to the same religion as the marauders who wanted to kill us. People are hard to hate close up. When we move in and hear each other's experiences, we realize that, you know, how innocent people on both sides get dragged into political wars. And then they are left with nothing but broken windows, broken bones, and broken hearts. You know, the news media and the politicians who tend to dominate the airwaves, they use dehumanization to divide people and to promote hate. And dehumanization is about demonizing the enemy by using words and images to move them into moral exclusion. That tactic has been used to legitimize war crimes and genocides. For example, the Holocaust, you know, the Rwandan genocide, the African American slavery. These are all results of demonizing those we perceive as the enemy. And, you know, I believe that this process of dehumanization is being used today at a time when the world so desperately needs to move in and to feel with the heart of another. Empathy is the only antidote to hatred. So let's break bread with strangers. You know, let's get to know those on the opposite ends of our ideological spectrum. After all, people are hard to hate close up. So moving in is the only way to cultivate empathy and to heal our broken humanity. Number 2, swap stories. Now, there's a British Afghan author by the name Tahir Shah, and he says, stories are the communal currency of humanity. Now, we swap stories in a bid for connection, right? Because stories open us to the claims of others. They break down biases and foster inclusiveness. That's because, our stories can convey our ideas, and they can engage our audience on an emotional level. And that's why stories generate empathy. And empathy is what fosters meaningful connections. But before we select the stories from our lives we want to share with others, we must always remember this one thing. Empathy has nothing to do with shared experience. It's about shared emotions. What do I mean by that? Let me give you an example. While most people, I'm sure, can't relate to my experience of Islamophobia post 9/11, when I highlight the emotions that I felt during that time, the feeling of helplessness, of hopelessness, of powerlessness, then I'm enabling my listeners to reflect back on their lives and recall incidents in their lives where they experienced the same emotions. So, an empathetic story is an act of generosity because it's not for the storyteller, it's for the story catchers. Now, here's an interesting fact. Did you guys know that the effect of storytelling on our brain are actually deeply rooted in neuroscience? The neurochemical oxytocin, which is also called the love hormone, that's actually responsible for empathy. So when we listen to each other's stories, this neurochemical produces feelings of trust and cooperation and connectedness. So, where we once felt disconnected from someone, hearing their stories allows us to bond with them. Thus, swapping stories gives us an opportunity to gain new perspective, to create shared understanding, and to foster empathy for one another. And then number 3, love thyself. Let's do an exercise, okay? That's not the exercise. That's just me drinking tea. But so let's do this. I want you all to close your eyes right now, okay? And no cheating. I know you have your videos off, but I'm assuming you guys have closed your eyes. Now I want you to imagine the face of someone that you love dearly. It could be a close friend or a family member. Now imagine that you can see their pain. You can see them suffering and you can feel their pain. What would you say to this person right now? How about empathizing with them and saying, I feel with you? Now, I want you to imagine that you are that someone that you love so dearly. What would you say when your beloved suffering self opens up to you? How about, I feel with you. You may open your eyes now. Do you guys know what you just did in this exercise? Well, you just practiced the art of loving thyself. And without that, we limit our ability to pour love into the lives of others. Because self-love is the gateway to empathy. You know, as the American Tibetan Buddhist Pema Chodron says, be kinder to yourself and then let your kindness flood the world. So first, love thyself. Now, in order to love thyself, you must be true to yourself, right? Being true to yourself or being authentic means letting go of what you think you're supposed to be or who you think you're supposed to be, and instead embracing your humanness. You know, the perfect, quirky, beautiful, and magical person that you are. And you know, guys, authenticity, just like humility or gratitude, it is not an attitude. It is a daily practice. Every day we have a choice whether we want to liberate our authentic self or whether we want to hide behind a mask. And the only way we have the courage to be authentic is if our self-worth is not dependent on the acceptance or the appreciation or the approval of others. Can we have everybody mute themselves, please? Can we? Muted me too. That doesn't help if I'm muted. So I said the earlier one was my son. He was fixing breakfast for himself, but I can still hear a lot of disturbance. So I just want to ensure everyone else is muted except me. So going back to what I was saying, so the beauty of authenticity, guys, is that when we are true to ourselves, you know, then we give others the permission and the courage to do the same. So in order to have empathy towards others, you must love thyself. And in order to love ourselves, we must be true to ourselves. So in summary, the 3 tools to cultivate empathy are, number 1, anybody remembers? Move in, because people are hard to hate close up. Number 2, swap stories, because stories have the ability to personalize generalized experiences. And number 3, love thyself, because you must reach out from your heart in order to reach the hearts of others. Remember this one thing, guys. Wars have built empires, but empathy has sustained our species. So in order to create social harmony in this intolerant world, we must learn to feel with the heart of another.